Welcome to the AGC podcast. If you don't know us already, the Akuta Group of Companies is a British interior design collective with a portfolio of 6 international award-winning design brands. I'm your host, Tori, and in this pod we'll be revealing exactly what it takes to build a global design collective that works in some of the world's most exclusive postcodes. You'll meet the talented individuals behind each brand, as well as the many interesting people that have joined us along the way. Stay with us to hear more about how we got here, where we are going, and how we plan on being a force for good in this world of possibilities. So we have a stunning backdrop today. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? With our Negronis as well. Cheers. To go with the theme. So it's anyone's guess what we are celebrating today. Valentine's Day. So thank you very much, Alex, for coming on the pod today. For those of you that aren't watching the podcast, we are swamped with some pink and red heart balloons.
Just for me.
Just for you. We put it on all for you, Alex.
I feel really romantic.
Setting the scene today. So you're joining us today to talk about fragrance.
I am.
So fragrance is something that the majority of us wear every day. I think it's something that we probably put on thinking it can give us a unique identity.
Yeah.
But it's also something that we use as a gesture of appreciation, especially at a time like this, Valentine's Day. But I think it's also a topic that we don't know enough about. So that's why we wanted to welcome you on. So you are the marketing and e-commerce director for Miller Harris, which is a luxury British fragrance house. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the drink.
I know, needed. So we might as well go straight into it. Why is perfume the perfect gift for love?
So obviously fragrance is a gift that gets given at Valentine's Day. It's something that's been an obvious gift to go to for a while, but an older burst your balloon, literally. It actually isn't, for us, that big a season.
Okay.
I'll explain myself.
That goes against everything I'm thinking.
So, why have you invited this guy? Completely against what we agree. So I think, and I'll explain myself. So I think historically, when you looked at the fragrance industry, if you cast your mind back to when your parents bought fragrance for each other, and you had the idea you had a signature scent, and you wore that scent in perpetuity, and that's what you did. That's why key moments like Christmas and Valentine's Day, fragrance and chocolates and cards and things like that kind of fall into that jewelry, into that space. But the industry's changed a lot, and this may be more for luxury, niche perfume. But fragrance has moved much towards personal gifting now. So people treat perfume a lot more like an extension of their wardrobes, the way that you buy skincare or fashion, or beauty, or interiors, the way that you kind of it's a personal choice. And people aren't just buying that one fragrance anymore and then waiting for it to run down and then looking at Valentine's Day and saying,
this is the one I want.
Can you finish it? So it obviously is still a key season for us in the industry. We highlight it and we do it, but
maybe more.
But February, because of that change in the industry and because of the way that people are buying fragrance for themselves now, it's become less of a gifting item. It still is, but less of a gifting item and more of a personal choice, because we talk about fragrance wardrobes and people build fragrance wardrobes, and they'll use that seasonally, they'll use that for occasion, they'll use that for, this is a fragrance I wear to the office, this is a fragrance I wear on holiday. And that's part of the reason why fragrances always works as gifts, because it's quite transportative. It does a lot in terms of triggering sensory memories and associating scent to certain places and times. So by having more than one, it gives you that scope to go a bit wider than just, this is my signature scent. And I remember what it used to have, and I don't want to stereotype in a gender perspective, but it was the kind of gift that you was like, my perfumes run out. That's easy, I would just buy.
Yeah, exactly. Because I remember when I was younger, you'd have it as, you'd sort of expect it, or at birthdays, you'd think, I'm going to get a perfume set as well. And you'd get the matching lotion, and nowadays it's completely different.
Yeah, it's going to a whole different ballgame. So there's that, and then the other side of the industry is, and this is more of a UK thing, but just generally, like Miller Harris, we sell the business globally, so we're in over 60 markets, and the calendar of kind of how the year goes has kind of all become a little bit global.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about Valentines, if everyone was talking about Chinese New Year, what are other seasonal moments that are happening?
Yeah.
Luckily, both are red, so that
you can tie it all into one.
And then I think in the UK generally, I think Valentine's Day's become a slightly...
Well, there's Valentine's Day. It's all about friends now, isn't it?
Exactly. There's a lot of kind of like personal value in terms of like buying for yourself.
I think it's less about being in a couple and being in love and making the most of that. It's about celebrating everything else.
So we did a campaign a couple of years ago called Everyday Love, which was sort of taking a different spin on it. And I think I've seen a lot of this happening with brands where they're just looking less at it's Valentine's Day. You have to make a big gesture of... Because I don't think anyone's looking for that anymore. I think people are looking for more like consistency of...
And I think it is a personal thing as well, isn't it, of what scent you like in particular compared to the other person. So it's actually quite a hard gift to buy someone.
It's really hard, and people could become so much more educated on it as well in the way that fashion is talked about, so that you no longer talk about fragrances in I like the smell but I don't know why, because there's been a huge growth in terms of like fragrance houses moving into the industry and actually talking about what fragrance is and how it's made and different olfactive profiles. The customers just become so much more educated. And then you know what you like, and that's very hard to with like from a gifting perspective, because it's like buying something for yourself that you're going to wear, or it's like buying a sofa that you're going to put in your house. It's not something that you want somebody else to pin on you.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of want to have some sort of like skin in that decision, I guess. So it is an important month. We see a spike about 5 days before. We call it a panic spike.
It's all the last minute gifts, probably, isn't it? Everyone's
forgotten what to do. It's like, oh my god, so what do I do?
Candles, perfumes.
Well, that's another thing. Like so candles, in that whole shift from kind of like personal fragrance, candles then has become something that's going to come up, particularly for Valentine's Day, where a candle might be something, or a really nice candle might be something that you would have bought if you went to someone's house to stay, or if you were going to someone's house for dinner and you wanted to take a nice gift. Candles kind of a more of an entry point. We're seeing it like Valentine's Day. It's a slightly easier entry into buying someone something, and it's a little less polarising in terms of the personal choice. Yeah, exactly. But you do sometimes think when you get given candles, you wonder if they're secondhand and someone's passing it on. Exactly. Well, so before we delve more into all the details of perfumes, can you just tell us a bit more background on the origins of Miller Harris? Of course, yeah. So Miller Harris was founded about 23 years ago. So we say ourselves as a modern heritage brand, and it was one of the first forerunners in fragrance moving. So 23 years ago, when you looked at the fragrance industry, it was made up of celebrity fragrances with a name attached to it. Then there were the heritage brands, the kind of Floris's and Halligans and Yardleys and things like that were kind of old houses. And then there was the kind of fine French fragrance houses, the Guerlains and the Givaudan and things like that were doing for perfume in the kind of like luxury space, but in the traditional way. And the idea of kind of perfumers fronting the brand just didn't exist. And Miller Harris founded on this idea that our founder was trained, and she was one of the first female master perfumers in the industry to come through, but she was British, and she's looked at the industry and looked at how she was being trained in French perfumery and wanted to bring a British sensibility to cut out some of the noise and make it a little bit more accessible and make it a little bit more stylized, contemporary, an element of modernity to it, and make fine fragrance something that a language that you and I could speak, while maintaining the kind of the credibility around how it had been built. And the brand's lived on that philosophy ever since. So the initial concept is to take the best naturals possible that you can find, and to create these rich, complex formulations of botanical-based fragrances, but breathe some colour and vibrancy into the way that we present them. So if you walk into a Miller Harris store, you know that you're speaking to an expert, someone who knows about fine fragrance and is well-trained and understands the the complexity that goes into making fine fragrance, but at the same time, they're speaking a language to you that doesn't feel isolatory or pushes you out of
speaking in normal terms,
not flowering the language. So we and that's always been the DNA of the brand. And in the 23 years the brand's grown, we have stores in London, we have some stores in China, some stores across Asia, and you'll find some places like Selfridges and department stores across the world. So we still have this philosophy and DNA of how we make fragrance, and the range is quite small. It's 28 fragrances, and then we have a bath and body line and a hotel business that we run, and then we also have a home business, which is actually how we came to work with AGC.
Yeah, so quite a diverse offering then. Exactly. So with the role of scents in decor,
yes,
should we be matching scents to particular rooms, to particular colours? Is there sort of a rule of thumb that you would suggest we follow, or it's just whatever you think works?
There is a rule, and it's completely up to the user, but it's something that we've looked at a lot. I've personally been doing this for about 10 years, and it's something that's changed like the time I've been in the industry, and it's becoming a lot more conversational about how scent plays a role in interior design, and how also scent plays a role in wellness and mood in general. And the market's moved a lot more towards that. So in the industry, it's called scaping.
Okay.
And there's been studies put into it now, and we've done a little bit of research into it, and it's something that we're moving towards. So we had a candle range when I started in the business about 3 years ago, and then you'd be surprised to hear that in lockdown, sales of candles shot up.
Yeah,
lots of people were buying candles for their homes because they're spending a lot of time in their homes. And we looked at our range, and it was very nice, but we realised it didn't have that structure to it in terms of how it was built for the home. So we did a whole project around reorganising it and relaunching it, built around scentscaping interior design. And there are two parts to consider. So I'll deal with the first one. I'll deal with the first one first.
Yes, please.
There are two parts to it, and if we look at scent first, because that's the bit that we're more experts on. You're more experts on the interior side. So when you're looking at a home, we looked at the way that people use their homes, the flow, what the room's used for, and built a scent profile for each of the fragrances that was going to suit those spaces. And scents always had this thing, and fragrances always had, I don't know if you ever heard this, an association with transporting you somewhere else, and a connection to memory. So
yes.
As long as I've worked in the industry, people bring this up all the time and come speak to me about it. There's been studies on it, but it's something that I get spoken to about a lot, and it is really fascinating. So when you're looking at a home interior space, it's exactly the same thing. Like, you're looking for the scent to take you somewhere else. And in really kind of like layman's science terms.
Yes, that's what we need.
Your nose and your scent is one of your key senses. And the way that memory falls into it is that you bank them quite deep. So if you have a memory from childhood, for example, and you visualize it or you see it on picture, you don't really get that trigger because it's in a kind of more accessible part of your brain. Whereas scent memory goes a lot deeper. So there's a much more reactive response when you smell something that takes you back to something. It's almost instant. And I've been in situations where I've been doing bespoke fragrance profiling to people, and they've come in and they've smelled something and they've started crying because it's instantly taken them somewhere, or you get a reaction because it takes you to an ex. You don't like it.
That's the thing. I think it can really associate with people.
Associates with people and places and homes, and you get a lot of people wanting sense of kind of like their grandparents' home, or that kind of where musky and dusty scents can come into play. There's a lot of that, and it's because it's so deep in your brain that when you unlock it, that's why it becomes so visceral for you, because your brain hasn't been there for so long that it's the scent that unlocks it, and it's almost the shock of it coming back rather than the visual piece. So again, when you apply that to interiors and you look at, well, I'm in my kitchen, and how do I want to feel in my kitchen? And then you think about, well, what do I use my kitchen for? It's the first place that I start the day, and this is what I use it for, and it's where I want to be in the morning, how do I want to feel in the morning, then you start thinking about where do those scents transport you. And then you apply that across the whole house, and every room's got a different part to play.
I've got so many questions but I feel like this should be, I would be boring the podcast, because I want to say, in the kitchen, should you have too strong a scent, because that's where you cook as well, so surely you want something muted or no smell at all, but then you want something.
Well, there's two parts to it. One is how do you want to feel? So there's a kind of like a mood thing, and I think that particularly since lockdown, there's been a lot more focus around interiors and within scent, but just focus on interiors, about the space that you build is how that makes you feel, and that having an effect on how happy you are, your mood. And I think scent plays part in that. So there's that side of it, and then there's the practical side of it. So in the kitchen, for example, where you do have cooking smells, and it goes from the breakfast to the lunch to the dinner, depending on how you use your space. Generally, citruses work quite well. Because they cut through
any sort
that kind of like the cooking smell. Because they're quite light molecules. We call them top notes, but they're the ones that kind of like are instantly kind of like sharp and cut through. So we would look to a citrus piece, but we'd also probably bring some green in there as well. Because it's quite muted, and it brings this kind of element of kind of like outdoors in, which is kind of where people want their kitchens to go. There's a lot of herbs in the kitchen, so you probably start finding kind of herbaceous notes kind of coming through. So your vetiver and rosemaries and things like that coming into kitchen scent. So there is a science to the kind of practical side of it, and then there's a science to the how do I want to feel.
So like you get colour psychology, that's a huge thing. Scent psychology should also be, but I don't think it's as much of a thing as it should be, and it could be.
No, I don't think it, but it's definitely something that's coming through. And then, like, I won't give you examples of all our scents, but we tried to match them to all elements of the house. And then we did the colour piece, because part of the DNA of Miller Harris is to breathe colour into the perfumer's art, and that's sort of the whole thing about bringing this British sensibility through. So colour has always been part of our DNA. So when we looked at the second part of the project, which is again, I'm going to use a term that makes me sound
choose your words.
Votive. So we call it a votive, but you can call it the glass, the jar, whatever the candle is, or the diffuser. We chose to use colour in the decoration of that, and but colour can be quite polarising in interior design. So there's an element, how do you pick colours that match the scent mood, but can also work in a space. If the room is blue and the candle's blue, that's great, but if it's white, we've got to find a colour blue that suits the kind of the style of the scent and also style of the room, so it isn't so polarising. So
I feel like the colours that you have used are quite muted and toned down. So that's why you can imagine it working
crossing over into
anything,
kind of
really.
And then we looked into the kind of, you mentioned the psychology of colour, but we looked into the psychology of colour. So different colours signify different moods. So if we're trying to put something forward that's meant to be about wellness and invigoration and calm, then what colour signifies those moments? So okay, well, that's blue. Let's apply that to the fragrance that we're trying to do that with, and bring the two worlds together. And then we went as far as to kind of like the time of the day that you're using it. So, and then sitting the scent in the kind of, okay, well, that's the fragrance that's going to be more used in the morning. That's the fragrance that's going to be more used in the evening.
So where should you have them, depending on how you use the space? So there's so many things.
There's so many parts to it. There's also fragrances that are really versatile that work across different rooms. So fig, for example, is a really great one for being quite versatile, because you could use that in your living space and in your kitchen, because it has that green, slightly fruity but kind of herbaceous note, but equally it could also be a hallway scent. So we did a whole science into the hallway scent's the one that you want to create the most impacts with, because it's the one that you immediately get when you walk in the room, but then if you have guests come into the room, that instant moment of what they think of your home, a representation of your home will be wrapped up in that scent. And if they like that scent, when they come back again, they're going to associate their time with you with that fragrance.
So is that something, if someone was to go into your stores, that's what they could ask all these questions and say, this is what I want in my house, these are the rooms that I use, and your team are able to help with them?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we like I say, our expertise is in scent first and foremost. So all of our store team are trained in the art of perfumery first and foremost, and being able to talk about how a fragrance is created, because that's the starting point for us, create the right scent. But then equally, all of this work that we did around the interiors and how to wrap that up also goes into their training, so they can help with that part as well.
Yeah. And can the average Joe be someone that works in scents, or do you have to have the gift of...
Well, I work. So, yes.
So no. You've got the gift.
It's a really fascinating industry. Like I said, I've worked in it for 10 years, and I've worked in other industries in retail as well. And it's the most evocative one I've worked in. It's the one that I've seen the most passion from people, whether they work in the kind of creative products side of it.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of love for what people do, particularly in the growing of the plants and the kind of like the natural materials and the impact that has on the environment, but right through to kind of people who work in the warehouse, or the people that supply our caps for us, or the people that kind of work on the shop floor. It's a real... people get into it as a sort of passion project, rather than a vocation. So it's and I think it comes back to that. It's quite a personal industry. People who buy into scent and really kind of like care about their choices.
Yeah, definitely. And then bringing it back to interiors.
Yes.
So for sort of 5-star hotels, private residences, why is choosing the right scent so important?
Well, it goes back to what we talked about for your home, and I've worked on so many projects with hotels. When you go and stay at a 5-star hotel, and you go into that lobby, or you go into your bedroom, it's a moment for you. It's something that you've invested in. It's something that you maybe will come back to one day, or maybe won't come back to. So the scent that you remember that for becomes really important. And to some people, that's just stealing the amenities in the bathroom. But I've worked on projects where, especially when you work for a chain of hotels. So if you work for a really luxury chain of hotels, and you have a scent, if you walk into that hotel in London, but then you also walk into that hotel in Paris, you instantly know where you are. Yeah. And a lot of hotels work on this concept of people feeling like they're at home, and feeling that comfort, and the scent plays a part in that role. And then what happens when you go into your bedroom and that scent goes through into your body products that are in the bathroom, and like the little miniature things actually moved on a little bit in the sense. So most of our hotel business now is we've gone to full size and refillables, and and that's a whole change in terms of sustainability that's coming through the business. But it's again, there's a whole industry that's built around scents in hotels, because it is a key pillar for them.
I'd also say so subtle, because it's not something you necessarily pick up on at the time, but you take it in without knowing, and then the next time you go back, you sort of remember that, and it just jogs your memory that, oh yeah, I've been here before, or I loved this smell.
And it can instantly set your mood for what you feel about the building, the design, how it's been. Because the amount of work that hotels put into the interior design is huge, right? They invest huge amounts of capital in terms of making their space live up to the DNA of what they've created as a brand.
So the
scent stands as part of that.
Yeah. So for scents, is there a way of matching it to mood? So if, for example, Valentine's Day, is there a particular smell that people should be looking?
So yes, the first thing is, the interesting thing is the language of fragrance is quite complex, because there isn't really a language to talk about fragrance in terms of matching it to moods, for example. So I've seen people talk about fragrance as being sensual, or being and it's a really hard one. A lot of food language and taste language goes into fragrance, because people don't really know what words to pick to describe what a fragrance makes them feel like. In lockdown, for example, people did I saw a brand that created fragrances that made with the smells of things that you couldn't attain at that time. So the smell of your local cinema, or the smell of your local bar, things like that, to try and kind of like open that mood. So you can essentially create a scent for anything. But your definition of what a scent is romantic or sensual is completely personal. because it's your association for what that is. And traditionalists will say that's rose, right? Or that's florals because jasmine, tuberose. These are the things that make me feel romantic.
Yeah. So we've had a few candles on before Christmas. We were burning mandarin quite a lot in the office and love it. That was a favourite with the team. It's got a fresh scent and it just seems to be an all-round popular choice. So I was going to douse my home in mandarin, but probably don't need to go overboard with one smell.
So the mandarin as a citrus is quite, it's a little bit more juicy than lemon. So you get a slightly fruitier note. And then that one's got kind of a really beautiful green notes base, so that's why it works really well in the kitchen. But it's again, from an interiors point of view, putting it in schemes, and I think I saw it one of your schemes in the kitchen recently. It's slightly more juicy than maybe like a bergamot or a lemon, and there's a slightly greener tone than maybe an orange. So it works really well in kitchen schemes. I think I mentioned earlier, and.
Well, we've been using your scents in a lot of our schemes recently.
Yes.
So I think a mix of candles and diffusers. So we'll definitely be, I think we're weaving you into all our schemes eventually.
Yeah, and I think we did a piece with you where we did some of that scent scaping workshops with the interior designers.
I missed that. So we need to get another one lined up.
So, so the interior designers now being able to kind of apply that to their schemes and think about where they want to place candles in the home is kind of a new part of the relationship.
But I think that's an essential part of them not learning, because I guess they know already, but expanding their knowledge on what works where.
Yeah,
I think everyone benefits.
And it's another story to tell for the client who wants to learn about why.
And a British brand as well.
Yes, it all works.
Yeah, all ties in nicely. And I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I had to look up all the different types of perfumes because I feel like there's endless. Whenever you see something, it's got a different name.
Yeah.
So can you talk us through the different types of perfumes and the differences between them?
Yes.
So I'll let you go. I was going to attempt to name them. Eau de parfum. Is that how you say it? Because eau de parfum.
I'm not French, but yeah. So that's a categorization of the percentage of perfume that's in the fragrance.
Okay.
So there's a fragrance is made up of alcohol, water, and perfume, and the definition of eau de toilette versus eau de parfum versus pure perfume is generally association with what's the percentage of perfume that's in there.
Yeah.
So eau de toilette, for example, is 8 to 12%.
Okay.
Eau de parfum's more than 12%. So what all Miller Harris fragrances are eau de parfum concentration. I think people perceive it to be that it's more valuable and that there's more perfume in there, so therefore it's stronger.
Yeah.
Which in some cases is the case, but you can equally get a perfume like an eau de toilette that's got less perfume in it, but because of the notes that are in that less perfume, it's a stronger perfume.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to kind of what the fragrance is made up of.
Yeah.
Because a fragrance can be made up to 50, 60 parts of different accords that you're building. And if all those chords are quite strong middle and heart and bass notes, then it's going to be a strong fragrance whether there's 5% perfume or there's 20% perfume. So it's not an exact science.
It's not just that's generally stronger.
But in layman's terms, people will walk into a store and if they see eau de parfum, they'll expect to see a slightly higher price point.
Yeah.
They'll also presume it to be stronger.
And usually you can tell when someone's gone overboard with their eau de parfum because it just, you really notice it.
Well, there's a science to that as well, which is very boring.
Oh, yes. Well, actually, I wanted to ask about how does smell differ on people? Can it smell differently?
Yeah.
Yes.
So there is some science behind that as well. So the first part is that different people have got different pH levels. So different things can affect your pH levels. A lot of it's genetic. And if your pH levels are quite acidic versus quite neutral, then fragrance possibly might react different to your skin. So there's that part of it, but then there's other parts that can affect how a fragrance smells on you. So that can be if you're not feeling very well, if you're stressed, if you're taking medication, if you're pregnant. There's a lot of things that can affect how your body reacts to scent. And then therefore...
on when it's on you.
When it's on you. And your perception of what it smells like versus what somebody else's perception of what it smells like can also be slightly different.
That's so interesting. So perfume you buy maybe a year ago could be different or could be smelling different on you a year later because of different...
The perfume's changed, possibly, yeah. So the perfume can also change if you don't look after it properly. But just generally, the science of your own skin can affect it. Like on the whole, like we have a lot of regulation in the industry that when we put a fragrance on the shelf, it's the same fragrance as the one that we launched 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I've sat in the labs with the scientists that do this, and like the amount of work they put into kind of like regulating that control. Because essentially it's an IP that you're putting out to the market, and you can't have it slightly varying.
Yeah.
So there's that side of it, but yes, obviously the skin changes it. And then the other side of it is how your personal nose responds to the fragrance. So what we get a lot is of people wear fragrance and then they say the smell's gone. Oh, I can't smell it anymore.
Yes,
And that comes up around. And I don't know the exact science of this, but it was a perfumer that told me. But I believe the history goes back to your nose is something that you use in primary function is around safety and danger. So smell is meant to be there to alert you to danger. So there's a fire. I can smell a fire. It's dangerous. I need to leave the building. And that's what its primary function is.
So it's almost like an instant.
So it's an instant. It's meant to be a sense that protects you. So if that's the case, and once it's determined that something's not a danger to you, then your nose switches it off. So your brain tells your nose it's not a problem. I don't need to smell that anymore, and it moves it away.
Never knew that.
So people will wear fragrance, and then after 20 minutes, they can't smell it anymore.
Yeah.
So I wore fragrance this morning. I can't smell it now, but if I asked you, you'd be able to smell my fragrance.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because your nose hasn't smelt it yet, whereas my brain's turned it off.
So nothing is there to. Or you can do tricks, can't you? Like the smelling coffee beans to refresh.
If you're smelling a lot, so when I'm creating fragrances or I'm working on a fragrance project, I have to smell a lot of fragrance, and your nose gets tired. So you have to kind of like, at some point, you have to take a break, and your nose gets tired. Smelling coffee beans is a way of kind of giving it a reset. But yeah, if you're trying to buy fragrance and you feel like it's not performing properly, it's always worth just checking somebody else to smell you, because that's when you start layering it on.
Yeah,
quite
that's
a lot,
when
and then everybody else can smell
especially if you're trying a new scent as well, because you're just trying all of them, and then you don't even know which smell you've put on and what you're actually smelling, because you've tried 5 different ones.
And your nose just gets used to what you've tried. Or you start to forget things. One thing we recommend when you're buying fragrance, and if you step out of that department store world when people used to sell fragrance, so you'd walk in and there's people everywhere and they're spraying things at you.
Yes, yeah, giving you cards in your face, and
is to try and find somewhere where you can take a bit of time to talk to somebody and learn about what kind of fragrances you might like, and then try to buy an impulse. Try and take a sample, or if you really like something, put it on your skin and then leave the store and walk away, even for 10-15 minutes, because the fragrance will evolve on your skin. And marketing people, I include myself, tend to create fragrances where the hero notes, the magic notes, are all in the top, so they're what you smell first. So you get lots of citruses and certain florals in the top notes, and they're the things that kind of draw people in.
Yeah,
they're the instant kind of sellable notes, but they're the things that sometimes dissipate quite quickly because they're the lighter molecules, and the fragrance will evolve, and the fragrance should evolve. Like when a perfumer makes a fragrance, they're looking to create something that goes on a journey from how it smells initially to how it smells 8 hours later. And that's part of the work that we do when we're creating fragrance. So if that's the case and you buy it on the impulse of the top notes when you first smell it, chances are it won't smell like that an hour later. So you should always kind of leave and go away, live with it for a while, and kind of come back if you still enjoy it. It's so
complex, isn't it? But that's why I think you literally see a scent on the shelf and you buy it and you think that smells nice, done. But actually coming into a store like yours, taking the time to discuss it with someone, and then really understanding what scents you like, there's something in that. But I guess, like you say, it's quite a new-ish thing.
I think
people
so,
can
yeah.
do.
And I think and having the trust in the product for the customer to be able to walk away. Because one of the first rules of retail is don't let people leave the store without spending something.
Yeah, get their money.
But what we're trying to train this idea that you come into the store and you should be able to leave.
Yeah.
Because if we trust the product is good enough,
You're
then
going to come back.
These people will come back.
Yeah.
And generally the customer is becoming a lot more educated. And this is to do with lots of other brands doing really good jobs for fragrance as well. And people knowing what notes are.
Yeah.
So I like that Neroli scent by that brand, and they've called it Neroli, so that makes it a lot easier for me to know that I like Neroli now.
Yeah.
And then you can walk into another brand and say, I think I like Neroli.
Yeah.
And I know what that is. Mm-hmm. So that helps a little bit as well, just generally the people becoming more knowledgeable about fragrance notes.
Yeah.
They like florals, or they like they like wood, they like aromatics, and I think that's changed.
People are becoming more up to speed with actual words of how scents are used. And so Miller Harris is a conscious luxury brand.
Yes.
So are there particular innovations that you're doing for sort of ESG initiatives?
Yeah.
Is there, so I think you're upcycling ingredients.
We launched an upcycling program about 3 years ago. And it follows on from the philosophy of the brand. So naturals play a part in the industry, but we are not a complete naturals brand, and there's reasons for that. And there's a place for the businesses who want to be completely natural. But our philosophy from the beginning was be as natural as possible. It's more important to use the best naturals and know where they come from, know the provenance of the ingredients, and pay the supplier the right amount to get the best you can get.
Yeah.
Whatever you're sourcing. So that's always been the philosophy. And then synthetics do play a part, because if you want the perfume to have that access to the widest variety of fragrances, and you want to make interesting, exciting fragrances, there are some things that you simply can't make from the natural world anymore. Either because they're allergens or because it's impossible to create that smell anymore. And there has been more of a movement towards synthetics being better understood in terms of sustainability, because you aren't farming something. It is still a natural product, but you're synthetically creating it. And the molecular space around a certain scent. So there's been a bit more balance brought into the industry, and I think there's still a perception that synthetics are bad and naturals are good.
Yeah.
But there is a little bit more education coming through where people understand that those two worlds sit together. But if your philosophy is around sourcing naturals first and sourcing the best naturals, you have to look from an ESG point of view at the fact that you're farming. And farming has an impact on the environment. So, and that's not why farming's bad, but it takes land, it takes water, it takes, and then yes, you're growing something and you're recycling it and you're doing that on a seasonal basis, but a lot of energy goes into the process of creating natural materials. So we worked with our supplier in a program called Upcycling, which was around what are we wasting within the creation of the natural process, and how can we use that where it's not previously being used? Where is that product being used outside of our industry, where we can use it not from its original source, but from somewhere it's already
used? It's a byproduct.
It's a byproduct of something else. So as an example, oak wood.
Yeah.
We can go and source oak wood from its original natural source, or we can go to the wine industry where it's already been used to do something else and take the chips from the barrels and use that to extract the scent.
Wow.
So it's already gone through a process.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of movement towards that, and it can't be applied to every single ingredient we work with. There's thousands of ingredients.
Yeah.
But
the fact that you're making an effort to find these things where you can.
Yeah. And it's almost like opening a book and saying, okay, well, how do we make ylang ylang? Can we do that in a different way? What are we wasting? And breaking the process up. And then in some cases, the answer is no. It's as efficient as it can be. And in some cases, we realise there's a way of us being a bit more efficient, or using that part that we're not using, or farming it in a different way, or recycling the water so we do have.
But as soon as you've done that, I think then you open that up to other people, don't you, and other companies who are doing the same thing and thinking, okay, well, actually we could look at they're doing that, so why can't we do that as well?
Yeah, and then it becomes a movement and everybody starts to do it.
So before we wrap up, Alex, and because you're an expert in the field, people will be interested to know what your favourite scent is.
Well, I've got a lot of scent. You'd be
Okay.
surprised to hear.
Okay. One for morning, one for afternoon.
Well, I bought into the philosophy that I'm preaching. So, and obviously I have lots of Miller Harris fragrances because I'm involved in creating them. So I think Miller Harris got about 28 fragrances, and I've probably got them all in my house. I've got some others. So I do mix around, but there's probably two. One is that because I'm responsible for creating the fragrances, it's a really long process. It takes about 2 years to create a fragrance, from the sort of creation of the idea to kind of it landing in Selfridges and being sat on the shelf or marketing. And if you're involved in the process right from the origin,
you get very
by the time you get very attached, but you also smell it quite a lot.
Yeah.
And that either goes one way or the other, where by the time it launches, and then you've got to go and market it, and you've got to talk to people and smell it, and you sometimes fall out of love with your own work. And that's happened from time to time. But I launched one last year called Hydra Fig, which was created by a perfumer called Emily Bouge, and I'm in love with that one. I think she did an amazing job on it, so I still wear that a lot. And I think it's one of those that's going to stay. So if you've seen it so much and you still love it, it's a good sign that it's going to do well.
Yeah.
And then there's another fragrance that we have called Vetiver Insolent, which was launched 8 years ago by another really great perfumer called Matthew Nadan. And I like the fragrances where they take a single note origin, so vetiver or fig, and just wrap it in a way that no one's ever really done that with vetiver. And that's what you did with that one. It's
and if you said
classic vetiver fragrance, but twisted with this kind of earthy green notes, really peppery and woody. I think it's
8 years on, you're still loving it.
It's 8 years on, I'm still loving it.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for joining us. Really fascinating topic. And hopefully we've given people ideas. I know maybe Valentine's isn't the time of year to buy perfume, but people can buy your favourites and know they're in for a good thing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Interior Insider. Remember to subscribe to be the first to listen to our latest episodes, and be sure to comment who you'd like to hear from next. Speak soon.